This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Today we're going to take a look at a hearing that happened a few weeks ago. I've been meaning to talk about it for a while, but we have all been so busy with these distractions from the diabolical duo. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some of this hearing on social media censorship as it's directly tied to what Harry and Meghan had been doing to so many of us on social media, including YouTubers like myself and others. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation had this hearing on October 8, 2025, about government social media censorship. Senator Schmidt from Missouri chaired this hearing and opens with this statement.
The author of the great book Dune, Frank Herbert, set the table for what techno-totalitarianism looked like. Once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. In the West, we're headed down this path towards thought crime enslavement. In the United Kingdom, 30 Brits are arrested per day for speech-related offenses. In the EU, the Digital Services Act is creating a censorship regime that would make communist China blush. In the United States, before President Trump's return to power, the American vast censorship enterprise sought to control speech, to control how we think, and to influence national discourse and elections. In 2022, as the Attorney General of Missouri, I filed the landmark lawsuit Missouri versus Biden, which Justice Alito called one of the most important First Amendment cases in American history. Though my lawsuit uncovered a vast censorship regime perpetrated by the Biden administration. I saw all the emails. I saw all the text messages. I deposed senior government officials, including Anthony Fauci. Missouri versus Biden uncovered for the American people how the Biden administration built one of the largest censorship operations in American history by working in secret through third parties, pressuring, bullying, threatening, jawboning big tech into suppressing viewpoints that they disagreed with. Jen Psaki boasted about flagging disinformation with Facebook. The Biden White House was revealed to have been back-channeling with YouTube about suppressing disfavored speech, suppressing things like the lab leak theory. White House Digital Director Rob Flaherty pressured platforms like Facebook and YouTube to censor all kinds of COVID-related speech. Joe Biden said Facebook was killing people. Last week, Chairman Cruz and the Senate Commerce Committee released a report that revealed more details about how the Biden administration, as part of this larger censorship operation, weaponized the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, into an agent of censorship pressuring big tech to police speech.
Now, before you click off, I just want to tell you that the only reason why I'm bringing this to you is because it's more evidence that's going to show you how Harry and Meghan were connected to all of this. So please be patient, stick this out with me, because you're going to see how all of this ties back to the involvement and meddling that Prince Harry had been doing since he landed here in 2020. So the report that Senator Schmidt's talking about is this one that Senator Cruz had put out pertaining to CISA, which is this organization that Chris Krebs was director of. Remember, Chris Krebs was also one of the co-chairmen of the Aspen Commission on Information Disorder, of which Harry was a part of, as seen here. Chris Krebs was also a part of CETO, who was working with Sarah Jane Terp as well as Pablo Brewer. And that goes into the psychological warfare that we have gone through with these disinformation campaigns that Harry and Meghan continuously put out there. One notable gap in all of these hearings is Congress's failure to give focus on the role of foreign governments and global media, particularly the UK. Evidence increasingly points back to UK leftist-based NGOs, leftist politicians, and even the military 77th Brigade playing a part in weakening not only First Amendment rights, but also invading American privacy rights. Compounding this, a British prince, currently on U.S. soil, has been deeply engaged with high-ranking treasonous Democrats who have championed the surveillance state and suppression of dissenting voices. We also can't overlook this prince's connection to Renee DiResta at Stanford and her reported CIA ties and election integrity work. Yeah, I think Congress really needs to probe how social media platforms collaborate with foreign governments that impact American speech. Prince Harry's position grants him direct access to top British leaders and military officials, amplifying these concerns. So in this video, I'm not going to recap the entire hearing, but instead, I want us to look at the testimony of Sean Davis, CEO of the Federalists, which provides crucial insights that fill key gaps and further validate Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's ongoing role in these censorship efforts.
The Biden administration's collusion with big tech and non-governmental organizations to censor speech infringed on the individual freedoms of millions of Americans to limit what they could say, what they could hear, and what they could read. Fortunately, President Trump won a historic victory, and on January 20th, 2025, the first day of his second presidential term, President Trump signed an executive order titled Restoring Freedom of Speech and Ending Federal Censorship. But the story of censorship does not begin and end with the federal government. Big tech was censoring long before presidential jawboning, and I imagine will continue to censor long after. Here are some instances of pre-Biden censorship. All of big tech censored the Hunter Biden laptop story. Google banned COVID skepticism. Twitter shadow banned and suspended conservatives. Facebook throttled posts from pages like The Federalist and the New York Post. Facebook flagged and removed posts questioning voter ID laws and ballot harvesting. Two of today's witnesses, Alex Berenson and Sean Davis, were direct targets of this censorship operation and were deplatformed, shadow banned, and silenced for their viewpoints. Congress should address this problem with decisive legislative action like my Collude Act or my Censorship Accountability Act, both of which hold big tech and government censors accountable. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about what Congress and this committee can do to make sure that no American, regardless of their political leanings, ever learns that the federal government, trusted with protecting their First Amendment rights, is actually working to undermine them behind closed doors. Our founding fathers recognized that freedom of speech is vital. Protecting it is first and foremost in the Bill of Rights. While some argued that free speech was already protected because the Constitution did not give the government power to censor, the framers went further, affirmatively restricting government intrusion. The First Amendment is the beating heart of our Constitution. Free speech is not just instrumental, but an end to itself. In the digital age, with all the peril and possibility that accompanies it, the struggle for free speech is the struggle for civilization itself. I would like to introduce our witnesses for today. Our first witness is Mr. Eugene Valek, a senior fellow with the Hoover Institution at Stanford University and a professor of law emeritus at UCLA School of Law. He's an expert in First Amendment law, and his writings have been cited over 300 court opinions, including 10 Supreme Court cases. Welcome. Our second witness is Mr. Alex Berenson, an author, independent journalist, and victim of the Biden administration's embargo on free speech. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Berenson and his story and what we can do to preserve speech online. Our third witness is Mr. Sean Davis, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of The Federalist, a conservative news outlet that was subject to censorship and demonetization efforts for speaking out against the COVID-19 shutdowns. And our final witness is Mr. Gene Kimmelman, a senior policy fellow at Yale's Tobin Economic Policy Center and a senior research fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Center for Business and Government. We'll now recognize Sean Davis to deliver his opening statement.
It begins with censorship. It moves to the destruction of statues and monuments, and it ends with the murder of people. It begins with censorship. It moves to the destruction of statues and monuments, and it ends with the murder of people. The drive to silence speech doesn't end at a podium's edge or at the four corners of a page. It always advances toward the violent elimination of speakers. And that is because the authoritarian impulse to silence speech is driven by a totalitarian desire to seize total power by any means necessary, up to and including the murder of one's political opponents. This dynamic was made clear on a Tuesday afternoon in Utah last month when my friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight by a left-wing transgender ideologue who was enraged by Charlie's clear understanding and teaching that God created us male and female, that boys cannot become girls and girls cannot become boys. Charlie was murdered by this left-wing assassin who had been radicalized by demonic transgender ideology because he was one of the most bold and effective speakers in the country opposed to this evil ideology. Rather than see a nation unite against terroristic violence designed to permanently silence speech, we actually saw the opposite. We witnessed people praising the murder of Charlie. We witnessed people thanking his assassin. We even witnessed members of the United States Congress all but say that Charlie deserved it. That isn't the only recent example. The Democrat candidate for Attorney General in Virginia was revealed last week to have called for the murder of one of his political opponents. Even worse, he also said he wanted his opponent to witness the murder of his own children, to watch them die in their mother's arms. Why? To make him feel pain for having different political opinions. How many here today condemned that insanity? Or publicly recognized that someone with such a broken moral compass is simply unqualified to be a state's top law enforcement officer? We have heard the tired cliche that riots are the language of the unheard. But the reality is that violence is the language of the unhinged, and far too many people in this room are fluent in it. My name is Sean Davis, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist, a conservative digital media company that focuses on politics, culture, and religion. I'm also a victim of illegal and unconstitutional censorship. My company, my colleagues, and I have been the targets of a coordinated and global multi-year censorship campaign. In 2020, a foreign government-connected outfit in the UK colluded with Google to demonetize The Federalist. Our crime? We published an article in the summer of 2020 entitled, "The Media Are Lying to You About Everything, Including the Riots." Later that year, in the midst of a close and heated presidential election campaign, government-funded efforts in the US repeatedly censored Molly Hemingway, The Federalist editor-in-chief and a New York Times bestselling author who's here behind me today, and me because of our election reporting and commentary. I was censored for posting a screenshot of and a link to a Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision requiring mail-in ballots received after Election Day and lacking a postmark to be counted and presumed as valid votes. Molly was censored for posting a link to an article The Federalist published. The headline of that article, "America Won't Trust Elections Until the Voter Fraud is Investigated." But the censorship didn't stop there. We were also targeted for bankruptcy and destruction by the US State Department and its Global Engagement Center, or GEC. Despite the fact that GEC was explicitly prohibited by both the US Constitution via the First Amendment and its authorizing statute from targeting domestic speech, it nonetheless sought to drive us out of business by funding, developing, and distributing technologies and tools to reduce our reach, by bullying advertisers into blacklisting us and many other conservative outlets, and by coercing big tech companies like Facebook, Google, and Twitter to throttle access to our content. In essence, our own government secretly and without any due process, charged us with thought crimes, convicted us, and sentenced the Federalists to death. The censorship efforts our government funded with our money are still being wielded against us today. I'm here today to testify about the unconstitutional and illegal censorship of my company and my colleagues. But I'm also here to help you understand the real-world consequences in flesh and in blood of the drive to silence your political opposition. It doesn't stop at the page's end. The effort to censor and silence political opposition is not the final step in the effort to usher in tyranny and authoritarianism. It begins with censorship. It moves to the destruction of statues and monuments, and it ends with the murder of people, and it has to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Mr. Gene Kimmelman for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cantwell, members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today. So as we've experienced this explosion in digital technology, which fundamentally is transforming our media landscape and information ecosystem, I think the fundamental principles that our democracy has always relied upon remain the same. First, we must prevent government from censoring protected speech, as Mr. Volokh said. Second, we must also prevent media and information distribution platforms from concentrating enough power to block the competition and diversity that fuels open debate in our society. I'm worried that the current FCC is heading down a dangerous path on both of these principles. Recent statements from Chairman Carr echoing the president, threatening to revoke broadcast licenses for presenting content unfavorable to the administration has chilled protected speech. And the FCC's push to eliminate or relax broadcast ownership rules and to welcome consolidation in media threaten the independence and diversity of local media that are critical to an informed citizenry. Just consider, we have pending before us the Nexstar merger with Tegna, combining national broadcast companies with more than 250 broadcast stations, combining multiple broadcast licenses in the top markets that are the most popular broadcast television stations, and having ownership in 2/3 of all markets, covering almost 80% of all households in the country, even though this appears to violate the limit Congress set at half that level. Chairman Carr seems to be moving forward. And this is on the heels of Skydance, backed by Oracle's owner, Mr. Larry Ellison, buying Paramount Global CBS, now seeking to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, more studios, more networks, cable channels, and Mr. Ellison appearing to pick up about a 20% stake in TikTok. And the FCC is also considering allowing companies to own multiple national networks. These deals, and certainly more to follow, likely threaten to build a form of private censorship through outsized media power. It is time to update the law and establish new guardrails to promote local, diverse, and independent media. The threat to democracy also comes from the dominant information distribution systems controlled by Google, Meta with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Apple with its App Store. Here, the Trump administration has done an excellent job challenging these companies' monopolistic behavior, continuing the antitrust enforcement from the Biden administration. However, antitrust is not enough to eliminate the enormous power of these tech platforms. More needs to be done. Congress must give antitrust enforcers more tools to truly open up the tech information distribution platforms and modern media markets to robust competition. We need to reduce concentration of control in these markets, private control that can censor just as the government can censor. In conclusion, I want to say it is really time for Congress to update the Communications Act, to jump in and put an end to the threat of the bullying that we're seeing from the FCC, which chills speech and eliminates open debate and information flow in our media. And it's time to stop media consolidation and monopolization that puts too much control over the marketplace of ideas in too few hands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for testimony. And I guess I'll just start there with just a quick question. So, Mr. Kimmelman, you are the CEO of a group called Public Knowledge. Is that correct?
I was at one point, sir.
Okay. What years were you the CEO of Public Knowledge?
2014 to 2019.
Okay. Okay. Let's just take a DeLorean back in time to the COVID era. What do you think it's appropriate for these sort of NGOs or nonprofits to work hand in hand with government agencies to flag misinformation or disinformation or malinformation?
Mr. Chairman, I've worked with NGOs for many, many years, and I think it's appropriate on the left, on the right, for them to present ideas to the government, to the major players in the marketplace about their views. That's what I was involved in.
Well, let me get more specific then. Do you think it's appropriate that the White House was working directly through a number of different agencies to work with the University of Washington and Stanford Information to sort of outsource their censorship enterprise, to find out what the posts that they didn't like, and then work with, and then collude with at least, or coerce social media companies to punish those folks?
What I don't see enough of right now is people pushing back on this stupid narrative that Harry and Meghan are now peddling of when they first came to the United States, Harry and Meghan were just nesting and getting their bearings while Meghan was so-called healing from the terrible treatment of the royal family. That was not the truth. Clearly, they don't want people to talk about the time that they spent with the censorship industrial complex suspects, Stanford University, University of Washington, Aspen Institute. As I stated, Harry and Meghan interfered with the 2020 election by being a part of this. And there's no doubt that Harry knew about the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. Harry and Meghan were involved with all of these people by mid-2020. So they can't say that they didn't know anything about what was going on. It's absolute horseshit, because for the first 2 years, they were doing nothing but talking about mis and disinformation while people were getting targeted and attacked online by the very same people who was putting out the disinformation and misinformation.
Well, Senator, I think I've seen the government in many instances work
I'm
with
asking
private
I'm asking about this
contractors.
instance because it wasn't like a galaxy far, far away. It was like a few years ago.
Yeah,
Do you think that's appropriate?
I'm not familiar with the details of what might or might not happen there.
But what about the scenario I just gave you, though?
Working with a university to
flag misinformation so that the government then can coerce social media companies to throttle.
I
or
never
deflect
think
them.
government should coerce social media companies, so I can't imagine that
Okay.
that part of it is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis, your testimony described how in the summer of 2020, Google attempted to demonetize the Federalist following your critiques of violent Black Lives Matter riots. It's documented that the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH, specifically worked to demonetize the Federalist for these critiques.
A little reminder, Harry and Meghan also involved with the CCDH. Back in 2020, they were involved with the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, so were Harry and Meghan. And then fast forward, we see Harry and Meghan's Archwell-Fugazi Parents Network, a part of the planning session to kill Musk's Twitter, which was sponsored by the CCDH. So, you can't get out of this one, Harry and Meghan. And like I said, after Elon Musk bought Twitter, we then started to see foreign countries like the UK all of a sudden go into overdrive to implement these so-called new regulations and safety measures to control speech. And, when you look at this letter that was sent in the UK, all the organizations that Harry and Meghan have been aligned with, funding and supporting, are all ones who were responsible for getting the online safety bill into place. And now what we're seeing are these same organizations like Five Rights, CCDH, ISD, all now try to put the pressure here in the United States to pass similar laws at a state level. So we're seeing Five Rights being involved, which they have no business to be involved with, interfering with our legislation and regulations, but here they are with Prince Harry. Why? Yeah, I'm sorry, but this was never about kids. You go back to the very beginning with Harry and Meghan, you'll see they don't mention kids anywhere. This was always about controlling speech. And they got found out. So now, what are they doing? They're hiding behind the kids. And I think the most concerning thing, though, about all of this is this hard push to give independent researchers like Renee DiResta, like Shori Craig, Kate Starbird, and many others access to data about what is taking place on these platforms about users. And to me, that scares the shit out of me, especially if Harry and Meghan are connected and associated with these people. Who's to say that they won't take that information and use it for malicious purposes? We know what Harry and Meghan are capable of, especially with what we've experienced them do to so many of us. After all we have observed about this couple, Harry and Meghan are two people that enjoy harming others. And there's no doubt in my mind that it would give Meghan Markle great pleasure to shut so many of us up forever.
It's documented that the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH, specifically worked to demonetize the Federalists for these critiques. Could you just describe what tactics specifically were employed to do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. So I believe it was in July of 2020, we started receiving emails from NBC News reporter based out of the UK. I don't remember her name exactly. And they were almost taunting, asking for comment. Hey, Federalist, how does it feel knowing Google's going to is about to demonetize you for hate speech or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And this was news to us. We hadn't broken any rules. We had gotten no notifications of breaking rules that we had violated Google's terms and conditions or AdSense's or whatever. And so we started calling around to contacts at Google and learned that, oh yeah, you are about to be demonetized because of hate speech. Was what we were told. We had racist, violent hate speech, which was not true at all. And it was the CCDH who was working with this NBC News, I think it was called the verification unit at the time. They were working together and colluding with executives at Google, to this day, I don't know who, to come in and secretly demonetize us. And what I found most offensive about it was they were all in on it. They had news articles ready to be written, kind of crowing about how we got demonetized.
Now, this story sounds and feels all too familiar. This is what they did to Yankee Wally. Before Yankee Wally was even informed that her channel was going down and to have a conversation with Google, Ellie Hall from BuzzFeed News goes ahead and puts out this statement that was given by somebody at Google. And then you had Ellie Hall from BuzzFeed News again breaking that Yankee Wally's channel was down, never giving Yankee Wally a chance to defend herself. And then we find out, after Yankee Wally's channel goes down, that there are bounties that have been put on our heads, with Yankee Wally being the most at $20,000 to get our channels pulled down. And it was in this window of time we saw many channels being affected, like Sue Smith's channel was affected. Keep NYC Mega Trash Free was demonetized, hence starting the Royal Grift. And they also came after the Royal Grift and had me demonetized. Thankfully, I was able to get it back, but I lost several months of income coming in as a result of being targeted.
We were able to fight back. We had a pretty robust response to that, and they ended up relenting. Largely, what was interesting was in that initial news article targeting us, they had cited that news article, how the media are lying to you about literally everything, including the riots. The NBC News ended up stealth editing that out. And they worked with Google to come up with a new rationale for demonetizing us, which was our comments were mean. We had an unmoderated comment section. So we ended up having to delete our comment section to avoid being demonetized by Google because a bunch of foreign connected government outfits decided that they didn't like what we were publishing.
And I suspect the same thing happened here. We have BuzzFeed News working with Christopher Bouzy, who knowingly was working with these social media companies. And lo and behold, we were all affected and still have been affected to this day. Yeah, we can't forget Omid Scobie. No, he is not going to be let off the hook on this one because, remember, he worked for ABC Network. So they too have been also involved with all of this. Omid Scobie, a journalist for them and correspondent, was behind the scenes also trying to attack us. So, all of this that the Federalist is saying does ring true to all the things that we had been experiencing.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Mr. Davis, government censorship in the name of fact-checking is an unacceptable trampling on our democratic values. Knowing what we know now, how should social media companies respond if the government comes to them to deplatform users based on their political opinions? What's your suggestion?
That's a great question. Thank you for raising it. If I could wave a magic wand and create a solution or a response there, what I would say is anytime a government goes to a social media platform, Google, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, and they tell someone you need to take this down because it's hate speech or misinformation or whatever fancy label they want to throw on speech they don't like. First off, those tech companies should tell them to take a hike. We don't censor anyone. We're a platform. We're not a content company. And then number two, I think they should have to disclose it to the public and the people who were targeted. I would love to have known in 2020 who was actually behind the censorship of me and my colleagues. We knew we were being censored because we watched it happen. We saw our posts disappear. We saw ourselves being shadow banned. We didn't actually know why. I would say to this day, we don't actually understand the full extent of the government effort to censor us. So I think there should be full disclosure following an absolute denial of any sort of censorship demands from government. It's totally inappropriate.
In her opening statement, the ranking member talked extensively about protecting free speech, but then stated she wasn't referring to hate speech. I think what maybe my colleagues mean to say is speech that they hate, because it's hate speech is in the eye of the beholder. Would you agree, Mr. Davis?
I completely agree. Hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, they're just fancy words that people use to shut down speech they don't like.
Right. So if I say that there's only such thing as a man and a woman, that maybe when I got to the U.S. 50 plus years ago, somebody would have said, why did you say that? Like, obviously, there's only men and women. I come from a culture where our entire language is male or female, but that could be considered hate speech, right, if I say that?
It was for a long time. If you said that on Twitter for several years, you ran the risk of being censored, shadow banned, or permanently suspended.
And that's true because you couldn't talk about, and that's true, you couldn't talk about or speculate whether or not Meghan was lying about this pregnancy. Otherwise, you got demonetized or deplatformed. And I'd love to see this topic being brought up in a congressional hearing.
Well, obviously, we'll talk more about this topic. I do find it interesting that my colleagues who were totally and completely complicit during the Biden era, that were absolutely applauding people being thrown off social media, that were saying that any commentary about a Hunter Biden laptop story being misinformation was considered an insurrectionist, that now all of a sudden clutch their pearls because a moronic second-rate comedian who makes $16 million a year got fired from his job for having atrocious ratings is somehow now an attack on free speech. I don't know that they have the moral high ground here, but thank you for your testimony, and I recognize Senator from Nevada.
You pose a great question. Why were we targeted? I'm reminded of the quote. I think it was the baseball player Reggie Jackson. They don't boo nobodies. Well, they don't censor nobodies either. In fact, it's the most effective voices which tend to be targeted for censorship. And at the Federalist, we are extremely effective at tearing down false narratives and reporting the facts. We have a team of absolutely fearless, courageous journalists who get up every day to tell the truth and report the facts, especially when they might be facts the government doesn't want people to hear. And so they targeted us because we were effective, because we were exposing the lies about the Russia collusion hoax, about the Kavanaugh hoax, about COVID-19 lies that it came out of a wet market in China. We were exposing ridiculous new election laws that ignored existing laws in the Constitution in 2020. We exposed the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, which was 100% real. It wasn't a hoax. Somebody remarked earlier that, oh, well, you have the market to take care of. If a newspaper or a network says something that's not true, why people won't follow them? Well, we know that's not true because MSNBC and CNN, they're all still around. They lied repeatedly. They were not targeted for censorship.
Exactly. Look at that Oprah interview that was done. CNN forced Max Foster to retract his statements, calling Meghan out for her 17-plus lies. Or how about Piers Morgan losing his job at Woke ITV for saying that he didn't believe that Meghan Markle was suicidal? You see, all these media organizations have too much power. And they hate the fact there are independent voices now that are competing and taking away the attention of the consumer. They hate that they have to compete with the rest of us. Well, tell the truth, because people just don't believe anything that you're saying anymore. It's not our fault. Stop lying to everybody. You don't get to be the gatekeepers of information anymore.
And I have to say, it's nice to be here to hear a bipartisan support for free speech. Man, I wish a lot of y'all were helping us as the Biden administration was censoring us. We've been in federal court for 2 years trying to vindicate our free speech rights. And I got to tell you, it's pretty aggravating being an American citizen whose family's been here for hundreds and hundreds of years to see illegal immigrants get faster action in federal district courts than we've gotten. We are still awaiting vindication and relief. And we were not targeted because what we were saying was false. We were targeted because what we were saying was true.
Yeah, and I think the same thing applies here with Harry and Meghan. If Harry is acting on behalf of the state or the crown, he should be sued over it. And I do believe that the whole reason why Harry's not giving up on this IPP status is because not only does he want the access to the intelligence to find out who we all are to come after us, but also to protect him, because this is some serious stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Well, I'm sure you'll support my legislation, which would give a private right of action to a citizen to sue an individual government bureaucrat for suppression of speech. I think that turns the tables on the incentive structure that currently exists. Senator Markle.
I will be looking into this more, and I hope that it includes the ability to sue foreign bureaucrats.
I want to ask just a couple of questions before we close out here, because this is a topic of great interest to me. Mr. Davis, obviously this agenda that was at work cost you a lot, critical resources for your publication, your family. Given organizations like, I mean, there's so many of these that we just do not have time to go into them. I mean, the truth of the matter is what was uncovered was that, you know, we took their deposition. The CDC had approved words and phrases that social media companies could use in this secret portal that was established between the government and these social media companies conveyed this. And if people utter this phrase, I mean, this is sort of like, this is prior restraint, sort of like, this is what you will take down ahead of time. CISA was very much involved in this. You have an alphabet soup of agencies most people have never heard of that were weaponized against millions of voices in this country.
Oh, yeah, it still exists today. Maybe not on X as much, but on YouTube, definitely. There's certain things that you still can't say. Otherwise, the algorithm will pick it up and restrict you. I remember there was a time where you couldn't say Trump or Donald Trump or President Trump. You had to refer to him as number 45. Yeah, I think the most infuriating thing about this is how these platforms conditioned the masses, especially YouTube, in curbing and forcing us to self-censor our own expression. So there are a lot of words that you had to tiptoe around. Otherwise, you could possibly get dinged or affected or demonetized. Like if you mentioned Meghan's moon bump, I think moon bump in itself got a video demonetized at one point. That's how ridiculous they were in curbing the words that you were saying to prevent people talking about this stuff, which is wrong. Now, I just want to be clear here. It's not all the YouTube channels that talk about Harry and Meghan and the royal family. I'm talking about a select group of us that were around between 2020 up until the end of 2022. Any channels that came after in 2023 had not been affected.
We talk about President Trump a lot, but there's just a lot of just people who were online who had questions about forced masking of kids or the vaccine mandate, all those sorts of things, and they were throttled or taken down. So given what you know about organizations like the Election Integrity Project, that's another one, in collaboration with CISA and receive taxpayer funding, how are these NGOs still working currently to harm individuals from speaking their mind, particularly conservatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. The thing about these censorship tools and technologies and efforts is they're a little bit like injecting something into the body's bloodstream. They inject it in, it's in there, it's working its thing. And just because you pull the needle out doesn't mean the effects are gone. A lot of these organizations are still out there using technologies and tools that were deliberately funded and distributed by the federal government for the purpose of censoring people like me, people like Alex Berenson, people like my colleague Molly Hemingway. I don't know if we will ever actually be free of the effects of this censorship industrial complex that the previous administration created. I don't know if we will ever be free of the horrible effect that it created, the horrible dampening and abridgment of our speech that we were forced to endure secretly for years, and the extent of which we still don't fully know.
As I've shown you earlier, the mission continues, but the focus now is using the children as the excuse to push the censorship, but now at the state level. And where they're focusing is AI and using those algorithms to be the ones to do that censoring. So there is this heavy emphasis, you notice, with Harry and Meghan on getting control of those algorithms and those AI chatbots. And now all you see is Harry and Meghan investing and supporting groups to curb these algorithms or to, program these algorithms to be biased and carry out their narrative. Yeah, that's where the focus is now, is controlling those algorithms. And whoever can control the algorithms can shape the way that content and information is being pushed out to people. Make sense?
Mr. Volak, I want to ask you, the NIST AI risk management framework guidance advises developers, this is a government agency, advises developers to mitigate risks related to, quote, harmful bias and content that may not, quote, distinguish fact from opinion or fiction. From a First Amendment perspective, what is the danger of the government suggesting that these AI companies or other platforms should filter out, quote unquote, harm or quote unquote bias?
Well, if the government, if the government were to mandate that AI companies restrict their outputs in particular ways, I think that would violate the First Amendment, partly because of the rights of the companies, but partly because of the rights of users. Users as listeners, users as people who would want to use the AI to create their own speech. At the same time, when it comes to government procurement decisions, where government needs to get AI for its own purposes, it has to insist that the AIs provide accurate information.
You understand the danger of that, though,
There's
right?
definitely a danger, but at the same time, again, the government as buyer, the purpose of AI is to provide accurate information. Social media, I think the main purpose is to provide information that users supply. It's to provide, I think, should be a largely unfiltered channel.
A pass-through platform, which is why they're given the Section 230 protections in the first place, correct?
Well, I do think that is a good model as a pass-through platform. But AI cannot be to be effective a pass-through platform. It has to make decisions that we hope are decisions in favor of more accurate information. Otherwise, the government as user of AI will be constantly deceived by it. So I think in this procurement capacity, the government needs to be able to insist that the AI companies do what it takes to provide more accurate information and to fight, indeed, misinformation in their own output. That is something that is required. And indeed, AI companies don't have Section 230 immunity in that
Correct.
Kind of context.
And I suppose I think this is going to be a big issue, whether you call it woke AI, whatever. The previous administration, one of the untold stories to lock in, and I actually agree with Mr. Kimmelman on this point, to lock in the incumbents and the monopolies in exchange for that was to have algorithms that locked in this bias. And that is a very, very dangerous road to go down. So I don't think this is the last we're going to be, it's not really the purpose of this hearing, but since we're having the discussion, I think is really kind of an interesting and important thing. So
There's a lot more that was discussed in this hearing. If you're interested, I'll go ahead and link the hearing below. Check it out if you have some time. It's really interesting to hear the Democrats all of a sudden now be so concerned about the First Amendment, but did absolutely nothing those past 4 years when they were silencing conservative voices. Yeah, these people are absolutely moronic. But you know, coming up on Wednesday, there's going to be a part 2 to this where Google and Meta are going to have to answer to the Senate. So I'm looking forward to that. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.